But why should we talk at all about food, right? Why is food so important within TTIP, and why is it, why should we even bother? There's loads of and we've gone through in the plenary, there's a lot of other issues that are within TTIP. Well, food concerns all of us, like healthcare, right? We all eaters, whether we grow, produce, harvest, or buy the food. And decision around food impact on other aspects, public health, animal welfare, the environment, the economy, whether it's global, local, whether it's our own pockets, but also on our social cohesion, on our well-being in general, and culture. And I mean, I'm come from France, and a big part of French culture is about eating, as most of you will know. And what's been happening is over the past 50 years, the food system has been transformed into this illusory low-cost food economy, where large companies who used to be chemical companies, such as Monsanto, have actually reinvented themselves into agribusinesses. I don't know if any of you know, Monsanto used to produce the Agent Orange that was used in the famously used in the Vietnam War, with all the consequences that we know. And now suddenly they have taken care of feeding us. And with an army of supermarkets and long food chains. And the obsession of this food system, the ones that we live in currently, is producing more on a bigger scale, have ever lower prices at all costs, and under the mist of resolving global hunger and poverty. And the results are quite staggering that we see already. It's all started pretty much in the US, after the Second World War, with the rise of corn production and the discovery of some of you will probably know that, discovery of corn syrup as a substitute to the sugar. To real sugar, and that enabled the food processing industry to just boom. And you can see where I'm getting to. Basically, TTIP is proposing at its core to deeply entrenched and lock our food system into corporate control within the EU and the rest of the world.
Now, as with other areas within TTIP, the way big business thinks about deregulation is what it would call removing barriers to profit, any and all barriers to profit. And I'm sorry if I'm going over something you may already know, but this is at the nub of how TTIP isn't really a free trade deal. It's not about trade at the borders, it's not about tariffs, it's about being able to get products from one market into another market, which in the case of food are currently stopped by regulations. Now, in the case of the EU, these are, broadly speaking, regulations that protect our own health and the health of the environment, and also the welfare of animals. Now, for the US exporters, this has a very explicit meaning, which is quite simple. Because the US doesn't have anywhere near our set of standards, it means that they cannot export some of their products into the EU. Perhaps the easiest way to think about it in terms of farm to fork, well, it's as it looks. So at every stage of the production process in the EU, we try to evaluate what happens to food. So that means that by the time the food is produced and it's ready to be sold, we know that it's safe. Now, the US approach is the direct opposite, and this is where you can understand what these chlorine washes and lactic acid washes mean. Essentially, it's almost a form of moral hazard. So it doesn't matter what you do when you're producing that food, because at the end of that process, you're going to wash it in an acid. So that returns back to what the EU is saying about the number one reason they rejected chlorine washes for chicken which is that it masks bad food hygiene practices. It's when I say moral hazard, it's similar in a way to what we talk about with the big banks being too big to fail. If your bank is too big to fail, you know whatever you do, the government is going to bail you out. It encourages you to act in a risky way. Now, if you know when you're producing food that you're just going to wash it in some acid at the end, it doesn't encourage you to be careful in the way you produce it. Now, the precautionary principle, and this really is at the heart of the EU's legislative process, basically says that if you're trying to bring a product to market, you have to prove to the government before you can get it to market that this product is safe. You have to show evidence that it won't harm people and it won't harm the environment. Now, in the US, the system is the opposite. The burden is on the government to show that this food will harm people and will harm the environment. I mean, and aside from everything else, that means taxpayers are paying for the government to try and prove this. There's a very good example here which highlights this kind of discrepancy. With pesticides, in the EU, we apply a precautionary principle approach. So when the pesticide is put forward by the company, Syngenta, whoever it may be, they have to show the evidence this won't harm people, this won't harm their health, it won't harm the environment. In the US, they also factor in how much profit that product might make. So what this basically means is if your pesticide could be highly profitable, it lowers the standard you have to reach in terms of health impacts and environmental impacts. I don't know about you, that's not a world I want to live in, where our health is suborned to the profit of a corporation which already makes billions so it can spray this pesticide, which, by the way, these are called plant protection products. It sounds lovely and warm. Plant protection products into our food system. And as I said, 40% I think of US corn, 40% of US grain is not allowed into the EU because of pesticide levels. Now, the EU is calling this, the EC, is saying that the farm to fork process is inviolable. But as we can already see, they've approved lactic acid beef washers. So how inviolable is it? And to give you some context of what's going on behind the scenes here, I'm sure you already know the way we conceive of TTIP is by big business and for big business. 119 secret meetings with corporations ahead of drafting the text. And this was all in secret. And these are some of the people that have been lobbying. US meat, dairy, seed, biotech, and meat producing associations. And to name a few corporations, Nestle. I don't know if any of you already know just how bad Nestle are. I used to work on water, so for me they were the fundamental enemy. Walmart, Coca-Cola, and the euphemistically named Yum. You probably haven't heard of Yum, with an exclamation mark, so Yum. They own Pizza Hut and KFC, who produce innovative chicken. The response you'd get from the EC, if they heard me saying this, they'd say, well, this is more myths from these radical NGOs. So this is some good ammunition for you. There are 2 reports which have been written for members of the European Parliament, specifically for a committee that investigates agriculture, that investigated food, what they call sanitary and phytosanitary products, which basically means plant and animal health protection. And that also looked at cloning and GMOs. Now these reports, we'll be posting all of this on our website later so you can access them. They're pretty categorical in highlighting the differences between the EU and the US. A chapter that was leaked and then later released as part of the EC's transparency regime, which is where you release a chapter that's already been leaked. Now, in this chapter, what was made explicitly clear is that one of the last resorts we have in ensuring that we can check food coming into our countries as safe is going to be done away with, and that's port inspections. Currently, the FDA, the Food and Drug Authority, I think, Food and Drug Administration in the US, they examine 0.6% of products that arrive in the ports. In the EU, we're roughly 30 times higher than this, with 20% examined. Under TTIP, you wouldn't be able to examine this anymore. As long as the exporting authority says, no, it's fine, that means you have to accept that, it's fine. Now that could mean there's just been a BSE outbreak. But the US says, no, the products are fine. And the US, being driven by these corporations, say, no, these products are fine. We have to let them in. There is no choice. So I highly recommend that you do check out these reports, and next time you're told that this isn't true, you can say, well, look at the reports from the European Parliament. It makes this crystal clear.
We have a right to decide what we eat, to ensure that our food in our rural or urban communities is healthy and accessible for everyone. And this is the basic principle of food sovereignty, which I was mentioning briefly earlier. And basically, it's about regaining the control over our food system, to have the power to decide what we eat, where the food is produced, by whom and how, and be able to pay a just price for it. It's envisage a food system which based on very simple principle: food for people, valuing food providers, making decision locally, building knowledge and skills, especially for people that want to go into farming, and working with nature. The work on TTIP and food really kind of encompasses a wider work on the type of food system that we want.